Yeah, it's sort of 10 a.m. in the morning over here. It's middle of summer, so it's a good time.
Awesome. All right, guys. Welcome to Beard of Darkness Book Reviews. Oh my goodness, I've been looking forward to this ever since I found out he was running a Kickstarter for this amazing sounding book that I can't wait to get into. How are you doing, Jed Herne? I've been watching you for a long time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Matt. I'm super excited to chat. Like I was saying to you before we started recording, I have not done a live stream in many years, so I'm going to be
Oh
quite
wow,
rusty, but I'm
years.
very excited. Yeah, I've just mostly been, putting up YouTube videos that have been not really requiring me to be live, so it's going to be a fun
But
atmosphere.
extremely successful ones. Oh my
Thank you.
goodness, guys, go look at his numbers. I think what 241,000 views on one. That's incredible, bro.
Thank
That's
you. Yeah,
incredible.
it's been a good journey to get to that point. I've been sort of uploading on the channel for probably 5 years, and if you YouTube has a great feature where you can go to a channel, you can go to their videos, and you can sort by oldest. And if you do that, you'll see how like garbage my initial ones were. So
But those are the best ones. Those are the reason that you're at where you're at, right?
exactly, yeah, it all
Ah,
builds on each other. So yeah, just really excited to chat today about the book and just anything else that comes up, I suppose.
absolutely. So yeah, we've got some amazing folks here. Matt Jones, he's an author, indie author. E.O. Montague, another author. Tron Tracer, he's new to the channel. Thank you for popping in. Who's this guy?
Hey,
That's Philip
Philip,
Chase. We all know him, of course. We were
long
just
time
actually
no
talking
see.
about you, Philip, and how wonderful of a chat we had. Timothy Wolf, another wonderful indie author. I'm reading his book, Platinum Tints of Darkness, at the moment. And
Awesome.
Knoxwich Book Life, another frequent person on the live streams. Thank you so much. Corey Ratliff, another indie author, and Lantern Valley. Thank you guys for popping in. So tell us all about the Kickstarter. Let's hear the genre, the subgenre, the whole blurb. Just give it to us, man.
For sure. Yeah. So first of all, it's awesome to see all the people coming in, and big thanks to Philip to tuning in again. We were having a good conversation yesterday, so nice to see. Nice to see that he didn't get too bored of my voice to come and hear a bit more of it again. But yeah, so Kingdom of Dragons is my fourth published book. It's the start of a new fantasy series about dragon riders, warring nations, and two young people kind of discovering their place in the world. And my main character of Kingdom of Dragons is this young boy called Roven, who essentially, after a dragon killed his friend when he was young, he vows to get revenge and get justice for this indignity. So he steals a dragon egg, he bonds with a dragon, and he infiltrates Elysium, the floating city of the dragon riders, in an attempt to destroy it from within. But while
Oh,
he's there, he begins to bond with his dragon, he begins to bond with some of the other students there, and he begins to question whether his mission is going down the right course, shall we say.
so would you repeat the floating city of dragon
That's
riders?
right.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
Elysium.
What an idea, man. How did you come up with that?
Well, I just really love the idea of. I think with a lot of my fantasy books, I try to push the world building to kind of the craziest extent possible. I used to be an architect. These days, I'm a full time author and YouTuber. But I think that architecture really gave me such a deep passion for just creating these really awesome spaces. And obviously, when you're designing buildings for people, you can't always make them float in the sky. But every
If only,
architect has
if
had,
only you could,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
Who knows? Maybe technology will get there at some point. But yeah, I just always love trying to push my settings to the fullest extent possible. It's probably one of the bigger things that people comment on in a few of my earlier books is just how sort of outlandish and unique the world building is. So that was my attempt. I was sort of just thinking about it and going, okay, so if I was designing like the perfect headquarters or the perfect place for a bunch of dragon riders to train and operate, where would you pick? Typically you might think, okay, maybe a mountain, it's up high, it's hard for people to access. And then I just thought, what if you picked a spot where only dragon riders could get to, like something that's literally floating in the sky, um, something that has like that kind of defensiveness to it. So it was just really asking myself, like, what's the most interesting setting for this to take place at? And then as the world building progressed, the Elysium became a lot more, and it's sort of I realized that it was something that hadn't really been created by this society of dragon riders, but rather had been around for much longer than them and had a lot more mysteries than they were maybe aware of.
this drives home a point. So a little bit of background on me. And it ties into what you're saying. When I first started watching BookTube, which I was just like endlessly watching everybody and anything I could find. The first thing was I watched every one of Brandon Sanderson's lectures, and that led me to you because you're a huge you talk about that a lot, and
I
how
love
much it
Sanderson.
helped you. Yeah, and it's really impressive to kind of see that come home. Now that I'm speaking with you on my own channel, which is just crazy. I've talked to so many people that I, including you, who I looked up to before I started a channel, and it's like it's surreal when you get to talk to them. So I'm really
Thank you.
happy you're here, man.
I
And
appreciate that.
it kind of drives home my point. Like you're very sure in your ideas, and I like your confidence, and you're very imaginative, and I think that you're a force to be reckoned with. I'm really happy for you, and I can't wait to see how good this book. I can't wait to read it, man, and see how well this Kickstarter does for you. Would you go over? I may have missed it. Did you go over the genre and like the subgenre?
Yeah, I would suppose I would describe it as sort of, Dragon Rider fantasy, epic fantasy, a sort of coming of age story about two young people sort of, just figuring out what it means to live in this world. My other main character, who I forgot to mention as well, is Zora, who is the sort of main student that while Roven is at their academy, he begins to bond with. She
Mhm.
begins the story as a ranger's apprentice. Her father was killed by someone from the nation where Roven is from. So when she becomes a dragon rider and her dragon has some strange magical afflictions that kind of prevent him from accessing the same powers as other dragons, which sort of makes him into a bit of an outcast. She sort of goes into that thinking that maybe it's her chance to get revenge against the nation where Roven is from. And so there we go. We've got Zora on the screen right there. Dude, the production value here is insane. This is great.
uh,
Yes.
so there she
So
is.
there she is. You can see her with Ranger's garb on, wielding a bow and arrow there.
It's
This
amazing.
artwork is by
I'm
Yasu
sorry.
Matsuka, my incredible cover artist. And then, flick to the next one. So this is Roven. This is my other main character. And the big idea behind this story was, how do you tell a narrative where there's not a protagonist and an antagonist, not a hero and a villain, but just two people who both want them to get the thing that they want, but you realize that there's no way for them to both get the same thing because they kind of are in opposition to each other, even if they don't necessarily realize it at the beginning of the story.
I'm always impressed by your ideas, man. That's just that sums it up. What you say makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's so interesting that you come up with this kind of stuff because, look, as somebody who wants to write, I really do. I have this burning desire to want to write. I'm not equipped with certain tools that I see people have, and you've got it, man. I think that's so cool. Some other comments, real quick. I have definitely read a floating island thing before, but I forget what the book was. Well, if you forgot about it, and I don't know. It might have been a Jasmine Walt book. Okay. I haven't heard of Jasmine Walt. I'll check her out, though. Timothy Wolf says, that makes me think of old Warcraft raids where you needed a flying mount to get to them. Now, see, I'm unfamiliar with Warcraft and stuff like that, but I want to be more familiar with it. And John, thank you so much, man. Hail and good evening, gentlemen. Good evening to you, my friend.
Hail and good evening to you too, John. Very formal method of address. I love this. It feels like I'm in some 19th century comedy of manners here.
Oh, well, that's a compliment. Thank you. And it's such a good audience. I love it. They're very they're always here. I love it. But this book community is a very refreshing one. And would you say so? Like before you kind of dipped into your YouTube and kind of reached out with authors, did you have a preconceived notion that it wasn't what it is?
Yeah, I think it's interesting the emotions you were describing about how you were just saying like, oh, I'm like really excited to talk to you because that's exactly how I felt when I was interviewing authors a couple of years ago on my podcast. Like, I'm not sure if anyone remembers it, but I used to run a podcast called Wizards, Warriors, and Words with Rob J.
Yes.
Hayes, Dirk Ashton, and Michael R. Fletcher. I'm actually wearing Wizards, Warriors, and shirt at the moment.
I love it.
The only one we printed. I was thinking about doing some merchandise for it at some point, but never got around to it. But
you've talked with Joe Abercrombie, man. That's pretty stinking cool.
That's exactly what I was going to say because, the first couple of author interviews I did on that show, I was really nervous. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe like they're letting me talk to these authors whose books I read and whose books I love. And this was when I was a lot younger. Andrew. Hey, Andrew Watson, the best podcast. Andrew is actually the editor for my YouTube videos. So
And look,
he
he's up
is
late,
incredible
guys.
effort. Yeah.
He's up late. It's really late where he's at. So thanks,
This is
man.
great dedication. Well, I've just got him like chained in the basement around here to edit my videos. So
Nice.
he doesn't really have a choice. But
yeah, what an editor, video editing guy. He does amazing videos. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
He's great. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, the first couple of authors I interviewed, I was really starstruck. I was like, I can't believe I just spent 12 hours with these people's characters and their stories, and now I'm getting to chat to them. And then you sort of realize, like, oh, okay, they're just regular people. Like, it's actually kind of more inspiring to think that they're regular people and that they were in the same situation as where you were. And then you get to interviewing Joe Abercrombie, which I did a year ago, and all of the kind of starstruck emotions came back again. I was very much, blown away because he's probably, I would say, my equal favorite author along with Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
And so talking to him was like, whoa, this is crazy. And
he's such a funny dude. Like,
he's great. Yeah.
So no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I hate the lag. Sometimes I interrupt people. So go ahead, man.
No, that's all good. Yeah, usually my internet's pretty bad here down in Perth because I think the Wi-Fi has to go all the way through the center of the earth to reach you guys.
Well, I was going to say we're pretty far apart, and I think that's so amazing. This is I talk about this all the time. It's one of the most amazing things that I can talk with you. I'm in Ohio, nice. And I mean, just the fact that we can connect and relate through what we love, I think it's just amazing. Would you kind of walk us through the tiers that you offer for your Kickstarter?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to do my best to remember this, but essentially we're sort of offering the ebook, so you can get the ebook, and that also includes some of the digital artwork. So something I think I forgot to mention is there's going to be a minimum of 4 interior illustrations inside the book, hopefully more as the funding for the Kickstarter increases. And that was a big reason why I wanted to do a Kickstarter, is so that we could actually put down some more interior artwork to kind of show the world of the Dragon Riders, the world of my characters and Allegium and all of that within the story. So as an ebook, then there is a option to get an ebook with like a special deluxe edition, like gold foil bookmark, which looks really, really cool. Like, I can't wait to have some of them on my shelf. They're just like, really gleaming and glittery. And then we have paperback, which also includes the ebook. I just love the idea of, like, if you get the book in one format, you kind of get it in the other formats as well.
I love that as well. As somebody who buys or wants to buy, who's already, helped fund it, but like, when I go through and say, I'll use Rob J. Hayes's, for instance.
For sure, yeah.
I did like the 3 hardcovers, but with that, you had an option where you could get the paperbacks as well, but it came with the audio or the ebooks, and then the under tiers. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's a good. It just makes sense to me, and it's like there's actually a book behind me on the shelf here, up here, by Derek Sivers, called How to Live. I really appreciate his approach to publishing, because once you sort of bought the ebook on his website, you can buy paperbacks on there for like essentially just the cost of the paper and the shipping. It's like $4 or something like that. Actually, that's probably just the cost for the paper. I think shipping is probably still on top of that, but it's just a cool model. I feel like it makes sense. It's obviously not something that is very incentivized for traditional publishers to do, but I think when you're self-publishing your own things, like, that's one of the big advantages is you can kind of try to put your readers first in that way. So yeah, like, that's a good question by Corey. Actually, we should get to that at some point.
As we see the cover, we know the synopsis. I learned a lot from you, so I'm curious. What's the magic system?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few. So this story is set in a world that I actually have written an entirely different book in a sort of desert-based nomadic tribe setting, which will eventually come out at some point as well. But that was actually sort of where I started from this. And then when I was developing the idea for Kingdom of Dragons, I realized, this is in the same world as that as well. So probably the main magic system you see in this story is the Sun Wardens. And the Sun Wardens are essentially this sort of order of knights that have these glowing blades made from molten sunlight. And all of their powers revolve around the sun. They're able to look at the sun to heal themselves. They're able to sort of turn themselves into a beam of sunlight to teleport great distances. And there's quite a few other things as well. One of the powers that I was quite happy coming up with was this idea of a sun touch, where if a Sun Warden that has developed this aspect touches you, the effects of the sun begin to slowly amplify until you essentially cook to a crisp. Wow. And there's really dramatic scene at the start of the story where Rovan, who is training to become one of the Sun Wardens so that he can get revenge against the Dragon Riders, he is in this huge arena with a bunch of other initiates, and it's the final test that will determine whether they can then go on to become the apprentice of a Sun Warden and complete their training. And all of the initiates receive a sun touch. They're in an arena where there's no shade, there's no reprieve from the sunlight, and the only way for them to get out of it is to basically steal a sash off one of these soldiers that's in the arena fighting them and get out. So it leads to this very dramatic sequence where Rovan, he finally manages to get the sash. Like, he's absolutely burning up at this point. He's stumbling to the exit of the arena, and a few paces away from the safety of darkness, he is tripped up by another initiate who steals his sash, and that initiate vanishes off. And so Rovan is left with this really difficult choice of, he knows if he just crawls a few more feet into the darkness, the effects of the sun touch will go away and he will have safety and he won't die. But he'll know that he will have given up on his dream and his promise to avenge his friend's death at the hands of the dragons. So
the themes.
Yes, absolutely. So he is very much left with this choice of, like, do I seek the safety there, or do I try to go back to the fighting and try to get another sash? So that is sort of a scene that happens early on in the story. I actually think you can probably read that scene in the sample chapters we have up on Kickstarter, actually. So that is one of the magic systems in the book. We also have another completely different sort of order, I suppose, called the Moon Priests, and their powers revolve around the sort of twin moons that orbit around this planet. And we don't see a lot of
moons,
them.
By the way,
multiple moons, like, it's my jam. I love it. It's really, really cool. It always works. Every single time I read it in a story, I'm like, that's so cool, even though you just
it doesn't get old.
Multiply by 2. But the Moon Priests are a somewhat mysterious order who many people just associate them as being this very peaceful monastic group that, are too busy sort of praying in their temples. They don't really have that much real world impact. But when Rovan and the Emperor of the Sun Wardens, Eridan, are trying to get into Alatia, which is the Dragon Rider nation, so that Rovan can complete his mission of infiltrating the Dragon Rider Academy in there, they use a Moon Priest to do it. And the way that they kind of get in is the Moon Priest has this ability to sort of turn them into a beam of moonlight, which transmits them up to one of the moons that orbits around the planet. And on this moon, which is about 300 times smaller than the planet itself, they're able to basically walk around to that moon and then teleport back down to a corresponding location on our planet. And on this moon, there is just a great sense of unease that Rovan experiences because, he didn't think that anything like this was possible initially. It's a very ethereal, quietly dangerous environment. And there's a character that they encounter there who some people might recognize from other stories, I'll say, without giving it too much of a spoiler.
A little bit of an Easter egg.
Perhaps, yes.
Okay, perhaps.
I can neither confirm nor deny, but I suppose
Right.
I have sort of just confirmed it.
Right. No, that's great. I don't think that's a spoiler at all. I think that'll be something wonderful for your biggest fan base to find. I think that's going to be fun. So when people, here's 2 questions. I think my first one is, are there inns and taverns at all in this?
I'm trying to think. Are there inns and taverns in this? I think so. I actually can't remember. I don't think I have written any. No.
Oh.
Why is that?
No, I ask this a lot because that's probably my favorite. I don't know, what would you call that? A trope?
Like a trope? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the Wheel of Time type thing. It was just I ask it all the time, so I wanted to know. And secondly, has writing your previous novels, how has that prepared you for this Kickstarter?
Hugely so. I think, beyond the obvious of the previous novels just having given me, I suppose, a bit of an audience and a bit of confidence in my own writing, this story of a sort of, exploring that sort of magical fantasy academy trope has been something that I've attempted to do many times before. The very first book I wrote back when I was like 14 or 15 was about this sort of version of Hogwarts rather, set at a school for superheroes in a somewhat modern setting. And I really loved that story. I really loved writing it, but I didn't quite have the skill to pull off that type of narrative then. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe this will have to wait. Then a few years ago, probably going back more like 5 or 6 years now, I wrote a story set in this world where people live on these huge spires of rock that protrude above this sea of fog that's filled with monsters, and they fly between the different rock spires in planes. It's sort of the steampunk setting. And that in that story, I had also written about a character that was trying to infiltrate a sort of Air Force military academy to, steal information, to be a spy, to try to sabotage it from within. And again, like I didn't feel like I quite hit the landing in that story. I did think there was a lot of strength to it. I edited it a lot. At one point, it was like 130,000 words. Like I gave myself 30,000 words of editorial notes to try to fix it.
You're on it, dude. You really have a scheduling brain. You have that analytical part about you. Sorry for interrupting you, but I really look up to that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like the conception of the classic artist is like, oh, you're very creative and you're very chaotic, and I definitely have that as well. But I think I've been able to approach my writing with quite an analytical lens when it has been appropriate, and I think that's a hugely important skill that authors need to develop, is that ability to go between the two sides of your brain, between the creative side and the analytical side, so that you can get the best story out of it. But yeah, those are sort of my first two attempts at writing a magical school story, I suppose. And it was only really with Kingdom of Dragons that I felt like all the pieces clicked. It was actually very much sort of the combination of, I was telling this to so I'm running like a fantasy outlining boot camp for some writers at the moment. Yep. And I was telling this to my students the other day, that often when I'm outlining my books, they only really click together once I take things that I thought could have been like 2 or 3 different books and I put it into one story. So originally this whole arc of, a young girl becoming a dragon rider and discovering that her dragon doesn't have powers, and so having to resort to somewhat dangerous means in order to infuse those powers into her dragon. Originally, that idea was going to be sort of the second point of view in this other book set within this same world, where that would have been one point of view character, and then my other point of view character was a sort of young boy from this nomadic tribe that wanders through the desert and carves different sigils and symbols into the sand to basically summon creatures from the sand that they can control. And then I was like, these stories don't really like mesh together. Yes, the characters do overlap at a certain point, but that feels like the Dragon Rider thing should just be its own story to set up this world, and then to potentially come back to these the Sand Singers at some point later on. And so yeah, it was just sort of like looking at a few different things and then just like merging them all together. And pretty much every time I've written a book, it's almost always been, probably with the exception of Fires of the Dead, which was a more focused like 20,000 word novella, but every time I've written a fantasy novel, it's always been, how do I include absolutely everything that I love reading or that I feel drawn to at this point?
Now, is that difficult for you? Is that something that challenges you?
No, I think it makes it easier. I think that sometimes writers struggle because they don't have enough ideas. They have, a couple of sentences to describe the book, but when you actually get into it, there is a sense of somewhat hollowness because there's not that sense of this being a really rich and involved world and these being characters that have a lot of complexity to them. And I want to read about stories where I have that sense of a massive iceberg beneath the surface, but I'm only ever seeing the top bit, the small amount that is kind of exposed to me. So whenever I'm writing books, it's always like, obviously I keep it focused and I keep it sort of revolving around a central theme and a central conflict and a central character arc and that kind of thing. But as much as possible, I think I tend to just combine a lot of the influences or tropes or things I'm excited about. So, you take Kingdom of Dragons, it's like, I absolutely love The Departed, the Martin Scorsese film where you've got Leonardo DiCaprio being an undercover police officer in a mob, and then you've got someone from that mob being an undercover agent in the police officer, and they're kind of doing this cat and mouse hunting of each other. I love that idea. Love the idea of dragons. Love the idea of some sort of magical academy. And so it's just fusing all those things together into something that hopefully feels, quite unique as a result of all the different influences that are being drawn from. And then even within this story as well, there are, a lot of other things that get explored in it too. The sort of romance between the two main characters, and just the rivalry and the friendship that forms between all the different dragon riders. So yeah, I think that there is definitely a lot of things that go into each book, and I've very much leaned into that. I think as I've written more and more books, just recognizing that, oh yeah, each book should kind of be like an encapsulation of everything that I'm interested in a way
Oh,
that feels cohesive.
no, wow. Yeah, in a way that feels cohesive. I love that. That's oh my gosh, so much information that you just it's so easy for you to come out with. That's cool, man. So you've kind of inspired me to ask this question because I see how much you love what you're doing. When you wake up in the morning, what is it that gets you out of bed and just makes you so excited to do what you're doing?
Whoa, that's a good question. I suppose it's just the fact that I like get to kind of talk about stories and to be writing stories like all the time. So it's always been the dream to get to this point of being able to write my own books, and then I've always loved the process of kind of talking about writing and sharing what I've learned about the craft of fantasy. I think even as far back as probably 2015, I'd be writing blog articles on some WordPress blog, sharing stuff I had learned from writing my very first novel. And I wouldn't recommend anyone goes back to them because I think that my thoughts have evolved a lot since then. But yeah, I just love stories. Like I love talking about stories. I love writing stories. I love kind of dissecting why stories work really well. And I suppose I'm just driven by, yeah, trying to pursue that as much as possible.
Just
It's
makes you
not like,
happy.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's definitely tough at times, right? And when you're going through like the editing for a book, or when you're trying to, do the marketing, or trying to package it together and stuff, there are parts of the process that, you might enjoy less than other parts. But I think they're all important. And it's kind of actually something that really helped me have. I think I've always been very enthusiastic for this, but something I saw with a lot of authors who particularly went full time, and I suppose I've been full time for the last couple of months too. So I'm cautious of
That's
this.
incredible.
Is
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, you do see people become less excited about it, and it becomes more of a job to them because now it's sort of the primary source of income. Like you've got to be working at it, regularly every day. And I think I've always been cautious about it becoming that same thing for me.
I I
Um,
was chatting with Ryan Cahill, and that
yeah,
was something that he very passionately talked about. He said, when I was doing this, I gave up my job and I started writing, and I love how much success I have, but now I have to. This pays my bills. Like
yeah.
this has become the reason I can feed my family, and I think he very much has to juggle exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, it's a tricky process, right? But I think that it kind of comes back down to like the way I think about it for me at least is like even if you don't enjoy something you're doing in a particular day. So for example, yesterday I probably spent 6 or 7 hours editing a YouTube video, and Andrew did a great first pass at it, but I wanted to do a few extra things on top of it,
Mm.
and I stayed up until edited that for most of the day. Went out and saw the latest Hunger Games movie with my friend. Came back, did some more editing until till midnight. Um, and when you're in that process, you might wish for it to be over, or you might not be there with a huge grin on your face. But I actually think that the sense of meaning and purpose that you get from it is what it's all about, right? Like it's not about, I don't think it's about like kind of moment to moment pleasure as much as it is about, am I doing something that feels meaningful? And when I actually look back on it, I'll feel, really proud of what I've done. And of course, there are moments within that where, if you're editing a video, for instance, when you figure out like, I figured out a sort of new animation I could apply to some graphics in there. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And
Yeah.
when you're writing a book, there might be scenes where, this I don't really feel like I'm in this, but then you have those magical moments where, oh, like it just clicks. It feels like the story's flowing out of the pages. The characters are really coming to life here. I had no idea they were going to say that thing. Wow, this is really exciting. Like this is the perfect story that I would want to read, and it happens to just be appearing on the page as I go through it. So yeah, I think that balancing that ability to have discipline and joy is really important. Something that really helped me a lot with this actually was reading the novelization of Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure if you've read it, but
I have not read it. No.
yeah, it's quite different to the film, because the film ends in a radically different place to where the book ends. The book actually ends with the main character, who is this sort of struggling actor who doesn't really enjoy it anymore, who kind of just sees it as a way to pay the bills. The very ending of that book, he is just sort of moping around his house one night before he has to go out and shoot a scene where he's kind of the third-rate character in this Western, and he's just sort of there to get beat up by the main actor, and he feels like this is a decline of his career. And he's called up by a young girl who's one of the actors in that scene the next day. And she's basically like, oh, I thought we should, go over some of our lines before we come there tomorrow. And he's like, why is this girl, like, she doesn't understand like how much of a drag this is. Like, I don't want to think about this stuff. Like, I'll just do the bare minimum tomorrow. But he kind of goes through the line reading with her. And as he sort of goes through the process, he begins to like kind of really get into it. And he delivers something that surprised him, that surprises Trudy, the girl on the other end of the line. And he starts to feel like this peculiar sense of joy. And then, at the end of that conversation, the girl's like, it's pretty cool what we get to do, right? And he reflects
Yeah.
on how he spent so much of his career, stressing about getting the next job, or how he looks in a film, or what people think of it, or that sort of thing. But then he thinks back to all the cool movies he's been able to shoot, all the scenes where he's been, riding on a horse, or the scenes where he's been kissing these beautiful actresses, or traveling to these exotic locations. And he reflects back on it. And he's like, yeah, like I suppose this is pretty cool. Like this is the dream that I, maybe once had, and I can actually tap into that dream anytime I feel like. So that is sort of how I feel about writing. It's just that sense that you can get very caught up into the day-to-day grind of, trying to get the words out and everything. But when you ultimately step back from it, it's like, wow, this is a magical thing that I get to do. Like you can see all of the books I've got behind me here.
Yeah.
I love reading. I love reading. I've loved it ever since I was a kid. I love stories. And so just being able to do that every day is awesome. And actually, it's really, really good to talk to people like yourself. And yesterday, Philip did a great interview with me as well. And it's actually really cool to kind of rejuvenate your love for the writing through stuff like this, because when you're just sort of cooped up in your own head and you're just writing out your drafts and everything, you can sort of treat it more like a job. You're like, I've got to get this much done every day or whatever. But then when you're talking to someone else about it, it kind of just like, it makes you realize how grateful you are for the experience, and how lucky I suppose you can be to, be telling these stories, regardless of whether the story, is something that's a full-time job, or whether it's just something you're writing. Like that process is something that you can take a lot of joy in. So I very much appreciate that question.
Yeah, what a wonderfully personal answer that was. You find yourself being ambitious, but you have to embrace the suck, as they say sometimes.
Yes.
And but it's that suck that really just kind of going back in my life, like it's not writing related, but there are dark times in my past, and as a lot of us have. And it's like, if I didn't get to know myself or push through and overcome these hurdles, I would not be who I am today. And I think that is part of every process in life. And you're not really, I like the saying, it's like, you're not really improving or like growing as a person unless you're a little uncomfortable, unless you're a little, you have to kind of embrace the suck a little bit.
Yes.
Philip Chase says something really cool. He says there's something slightly frightening about the idea of writing being the full-time job that pays all the bills, because income varies so much, but it's also a beautiful dream. I love that.
Yeah, I should mention as well, like, it's not just the writing. Like, I probably couldn't be full-time if it was just the writing, but it's the fact that I've got the writing, I've got the YouTube channel, I'm editing for other people as well. I'm running, the Fantasy Outlining Bootcamp, as I mentioned. So it's a few different pieces. And I actually think that is beneficial to my enjoyment of the craft, because it means that if I want to write an obscure short story just for the fun of it, which is something I am doing at the moment, I don't have to worry about, like, is this, sort of fitting into a grand, marketing scheme or anything like that, because I know that the YouTube channel is there and the editing work is there and everything. So I actually think that kind of keeping things a bit diversified is really beneficial, just because it means that you are not always having to be driven by like purely financial decisions when it comes to the creative stuff. And I think that, it's easy to look up to people who are like full-time writers with a sense of I suppose, envy, but I think it is important. And this was something that I told myself when I was, in the position of writing while I had a day job, to recognize that the day job actually gives a tremendous amount of creative freedom and really allows you to discover what you're interested in writing about. It allows you to produce the stories very much unhindered by thinking about how it's going to, feed you or your family or anything like that. So,
Sure.
um, yeah, I think it is worthwhile thinking about having that still diversified income as much as possible so that you have more creative freedom when you're kind of going through things. So,
When you
yeah,
speak about the day job, it's like without the experience, you don't have the knowledge. Without the knowledge, you don't have the experience. And
yes,
you can't talk about something. I mean, you can do research and whatnot, but a really genuine story has to come from experience, at least a part of it, I think. I think
totally.
the most real part of a fiction book is that story that the author's telling, that it may not be totally known to the reader, but is going to come through in a way that's genuine because the author has learned through a certain experience in their lives or dealt with these emotions that help further their passion, or in this case, writing. I love that. Um, are you a pantser? Are you an outliner? What is your writing process?
I'm very much an outliner. The very first book I wrote, I did pants it. I didn't even realize there was another way, to be honest. I just came home from, this was when I was back in high school, I came home from high school one day and thought, oh, it'd be fun to write a story. So I started writing a story about this young boy who discovers that he has the ability to manipulate his own density and then is recruited to this superhero academy in this, kind of modern city. And wrote that pretty much every day for the next 360 days. And after 360 days, I had the first draft finished, and I was a mess. Like the main villain didn't really come into the picture until 3 chapters out from the end, and it was just structurally all over the place. So I spent the next couple of years rewriting that. I actually rewrote it from scratch probably 2 or 3 times
Mm,
until I realized that there were these structural issues that were kind of just preventing it from getting where it needed to be, and that I probably was not learning that much by continuing to edit and polish and refine this, and instead I needed to move on to something else. I think I'd heard that many authors needed to write a couple of trunk novels before they were ready to um, actually publish something. So moved on to a different book. With this book, I decided to follow much more of an outlining process. I've been looking at a few different people's process over the last couple of years, and this book wrote the first draft in about 60 days. It was in a much better shape than the previous book, and then later published it as Across the Broken Stars, which is back here.
I love that
So
cover, man.
yeah, thank you. That's actually one of the few covers of my books that I've designed myself that I was happy with. So
That's incredible.
uh, it's probably like 50 hours of Photoshop in that cover. So glad to know that it
Yeah,
worked out.
it's very
But
striking. Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. So, uh, that book obviously it needed a few more edits, and I probably actually spent quite a few years before I felt good enough to publish it. But most of that time was spent writing other things. And so for me, outlining was really the biggest, probably level up moment that I had as a author. Just recognizing that for me personally, like writing with an outline just gave me a great sense of structure and clarity. It meant that the sort of emotional journey of my characters and of the reader could be sequenced out in a way that felt really logical. And it still allowed for a lot of creativity and freedom and excitement in the day to day writing, which is something that a lot of people are afraid of. They're afraid of it taking away from your joy while you actually write it. But there's still so much that an outline will not capture, like the moment to moment dialogue, the prose, the way you describe scenes, that kind of thing. There's still so much like that it leaves you free, but it just kind of it makes you less stressed, right? It's kind of like if you were to go on a road trip and you didn't really know where you were heading, and you were just kind of like driving, trying to appreciate the scenery, but also trying to figure out like where am I going to stop for this tonight? Where am I going to get food? Where am I going to get fuel? Whatever. You would probably not appreciate it as much as if you knew, okay, I'm going to drive for 5 hours today to this destination. Great. As I'm driving,
Yeah.
I can enjoy the scenery. I can stop for breaks. I can have a look around. I can take a photo of a flower or whatever it is. And so outlining for me is a way to actually make the process a lot more fun and to ensure that the final book is a lot better. And it's been really fun the last couple of weeks just running this outlining boot camp for we've got 6 writers in there at the moment, and just basically showing them my full outlining method, and then also them developing their own outlines and using that really as a mechanism to learn like story structure, character arcs, world building, theme, like all of these things that have taken me a while to kind of get to. So yeah, outlining for me has been a huge game changer. It's probably one of the biggest ones that I've encountered in my writing process.
If you guys, I'm sure that you guys are well aware, but I started my YouTube channel for a chance to learn. I never want to stop learning. I never want to stop talking to people and gaining experience and just relating with people across the world. I love it. And I think that through that, I don't know. I think that we all share you always hear the human condition, right? But that never gets old for me.
Yes.
There's so many themes that are involved with the human condition, if you will, and I just like how it brings us together through, in this case, writing or reading, it's just fascinating to me. And by the way, Jed has the absolute best teaching YouTube channel out there as far as writing, and it is just incredible the kind of information that you just pump out there, and it's I relate it to Brandon Sanderson's lectures. It's just information that's so good for somebody who's trying to do what you're doing. So I highly recommend anybody who's struggling with really any point in the writing process, you'll find a video that Jed has made. It's really incredible. Thank you for doing that. I think that you help a lot of people, and that's really inspiring.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at your Kickstarter page, and you are on the cusp.
Yeah,
you are
I
right
actually
there,
haven't
man.
checked it
That's
this morning,
exciting.
so I'll be interested to see where it's at myself. It's
Okay.
very close to going over actually. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it
I
is.
wonder if we
And
can get it
so,
there by the end of the stream.
yeah, that would be amazing. So right now in US dollars, it's 7,235, and the goal is 7,761. You're like
Yes.
500 away. That is so close. 166 backers. How does that feel that so many people are just anxious and looking forward to reading what you're writing?
It's really exciting. Like this is a book I've been working on for 2 years, maybe 2.5 years if you go back to the sort of initial inception of it. So it, yeah, it just feels really cool. Like this is something that I poured a lot of my heart and soul into, and it's had the best reception from my early readers that I think any of my books ever has. I have an early reader team of four wonderful folks who read through the early drafts and have given me a lot of fantastic feedback, and pretty much all of them have said that this is the best book they've read of mine yet. So really, really good signs there. Yeah, it's just really exciting, man, to know that like, okay, you've spent all this time on this story. You feel like it's a really great exploration of character, and it's sort of taking the dragon rider genre and like my own unique spin or whatever. And to kind of see that there's that many people who are eager to dive into it and to explore the story is really, really cool. And I'm just excited to like get the books into people's hands and to like start seeing the reviews and to start seeing the reception to it and everything. Because I'm really thrilled with it, and I think a story kind of ultimately doesn't feel isn't completed until you get it into the hands of a reader, and then each reader has their own way in which they complete that story. So yeah, for me, like that's a key part of the process, getting it into people's hands. And on like a more sort of practical level as well, like it's really exciting to see the support for the Kickstarter, because hopefully we can hit some of our stretch goals to include extra artwork in the book, to potentially include an audiobook there as well, which is one of our stretch goals too. And so, yeah, I hope it is able to, get a lot of interest so that we can get more interior artwork in it and just keep, seeing this world in more depth and everything.
Now, as far as the hardback goes, because I think a lot of people, I don't know the numbers. Do you get those kind of that information, like how many?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, what
We see a
tiers?
breakdown.
Oh, the breakdown of the tiers. So, what is the most popular? Is it the hardback?
Definitely the hardback one, which doesn't just include the hardback, but it also includes the sort of gold deluxe foil bookmark, and it also includes the ebook and the digital artwork package as well, which will have all the interior artwork in there, the cover art, that kind of thing. If you want to put it up as wallpaper on your background, you've quite beautifully got the book up as the background for this stream, which is very fancy. I love the production value here. So yeah, like that's probably been the one that's been the most popular so far, I'd say. Although there's been quite a few people who've ordered the complete library, which has everything in the hardcover set, but then it also has all three of my previous books. So Across the Broken Stars, The Thunder Heist, and Fires of the Dead, which is really cool because, from my perspective, it's like, oh, wow, like this person is probably going to spend 2 months, reading all of my stories.
At least.
Depends how fast a reader they are. So that's kind of cool to know that, like, okay, yeah, at some point, early next year, someone's gonna be there with just like everything that I've written over the course of 6 or so years or whatever. I suppose my first book was published in 2019, but a lot of this stuff I was writing, back in 2017 and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just really cool to be like, oh wow, these stories are going to hopefully find a totally new audience, and that hopefully readers will have an absolute great time reading them.
I love what Kickstarter's done for writers. I think it's really cool. It gives you a chance to build your fan base, and then kind of put yourself out there and get what you've been working for. You've put the legwork in. You've got some connections. You've got people who are reading your stuff, and then you finally get to do this really cool thing. In this case, a Kickstarter, and the value is one that I'm really impressed with. So I'm looking at the complete library right now that you were talking about. You get all 4 books that are hardcover, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, 4 hardcovers for less than $100. You can't do that. Like you can't go to Amazon and get 4 hardcover books, especially indie books, because they're just higher. They are. There's more.
Exactly.
They're more expensive. You just don't find that kind of value, and I think that's really important. And that's something that I talked to Rob Hayes about when he did his, just the value. And I think that you guys have both nailed that.
Thank you.
The value is amazing.
Yeah, I was chatting to Rob about his Kickstarter because we did probably about 120 podcast episodes together back in the day, and
he's such a cool guy.
He's awesome. Yeah, he's really great. So he gave me some good advice when it came to the Kickstarter as well, and I definitely can't take full credit for how it's structured. I'm actually working with Merrick Books, who has done the Kickstarters for some of Daniel Green's projects, some of ML Spencer's projects, Zach Argyle, and it's run by AC Cobble, who is an incredible fantasy author in his own right. So he has we sort of have a big group chat of probably about 20 different authors who are all running Kickstarters, and we're all trying to share the things that we're learning from that whole process in there. So yeah, it's been nice to have like a sort of a bit more of support for us, so that I know like, okay, these are the types of things that people generally are wanting. Like, here's how we can structure the printing to make it as highest quality as possible while trying to keep the cost down. And so yeah, I think that may have actually been Andrew's idea to include all of the books in there. But as soon as he suggested it, I was like, dude, that's great. Like, I love that concept. It just makes it easy for people to experience what I've written, and to get the books out there and everything. So
that's so cool to know that you and Andrew kind of talk a lot. I had no idea you guys were such good friends, but it makes sense because you guys both are just top quality videos. It's you guys do wonderful videos. And yeah, Montague, I think that's a wonderful thing, and it's the truth. Great set for the Kickstarter. It is.
Thanks, Hill.
If you guys go, the one thing I don't like, I use StreamYard. I love it. I love it to death. I can do like 10 people at once on one live.
Whoa.
I did 7 one time, which was
that's
fun.
So terrifying to me.
And I thought so too. And then I did it, and I was good at it. And at the end, it was one of those things. I grew through it. But it was fun. And but what I'm getting to is the best thing I can do. I wish I could make that like a hyperlink at the bottom. The scroll.
Oh, I see the scrolling thing down the bottom.
Yeah. Because I'm trying to get people to it's just not very easy to remember. So let's remind the people how we can get there the easiest way.
Yeah, probably the easiest way is if you just search like Kingdom of Dragons Kickstarter on Google. It should pop up straight away. It's not the most elegant solution, unfortunately. Can I put a link in the chat? Is that something that lets you
sure
do?
Can.
Or? Okay, let me try that.
I believe you can do the regular chat, I think.
Okay, so if I put it in here, join the chat, connect your YouTube account to join the live chat. This is me.
Let me try.
Struggling to use technology here, folks. So this is why.
No, that's all good. Maybe I'm actually here already. Let me try. Let me see if I can get it in there. Okay. Actually, the way that I go there the easiest, honestly, is if you have Jed on your Twitter. He has the link right there. Just like hit it, copy it, boom. Here we go. So we're gonna cut. I'm walking through it, people. Here it is. Let's see if that becomes like a clickable link. If not, you can probably copy and paste. It doesn't look like it's a hyperlink.
Doesn't look like it's clickable. Yeah, I think that takes us there. Let me check. Yes, it works. Okay, fantastic.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I've
There you go,
like I said
guys.
at the start of this
I'll
chat, I've
star
not
that.
done a live stream, so this is quite fun. Okay, fantastic. That works. Yeah, thanks for popping that in, Matt.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Well, I mean, that's the funnest thing I think for me is not have written anything yet, is just talking to people and getting what I would like. It's kind of the golden rule. My wife lives by that. She's actually really inspiring to me how well she lives by the golden rule. And it's like treat people as if you'd like to be treated, you know.
of
And
course.
uh, if I had a Kickstarter, I would absolutely want to be talking about it with everybody,
Yes.
which is just the coolest thing, man. So, what really is the biggest bump in the road, if you will, that you've come across with doing this Kickstarter?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think I didn't realize like how much promotion would be sort of required for it. I suppose I wish I had gone back and scheduled a few more YouTube videos ahead of time because I've only really talked about it in one or two videos on the channel. So I sort of just wish I had focused more on sort of creating some more videos ahead of time to promote it. I
Mhm.
think that simply just getting people to know about it is actually surprisingly tricky because um, even though I've been talking, it feels like I've been talking about Kingdom of Dragons for like over a year at this point. But even then, there's some people who, when I mentioned that it's available, they're like, "Oh, I had no idea that you had like a new book out or something like that." So, yeah, just I suppose like letting people know about it has been a big thing. It's very common for Kickstarter campaigns to sort of have like a what they call the mid-campaign slump, where at the start they will sort of go up quite well, and then they
Mhm.
kind of like plateau a bit in the middle, and then usually at the end there's like another big
Yeah,
spike as Kickstarter sends out reminder emails to everyone who is like, remind me before 48 hours before the project ends or whatever. So I imagine there'll be another spike coming in at the end. But yeah, right now it's just sort of in that mid-campaign slump where it's still been inching up like pretty well, which is cool to see. But
sure.
yeah, it is. I think it is nervous sometimes when you see it like, oh, okay, like no one saw about this Kickstarter today, or no one came in and pledged today, or that sort of thing. So it's just part of the process, and I think you have to recognize that like uh, you have to wait until you go through the whole, in the case of this campaign, 28 days until you can really judge like how it went and everything. But
Mhm.
yeah, I suppose the biggest thing is if I was to do it again, I would just try to not have as big of a gap in my YouTube schedule as I probably have because I've been very focused on doing a lot of other promotional activities. I think I would have just kept putting out like regular weekly videos on there and just mentioning the Kickstarter as it felt naturally. So because of that, people will probably get like about 4 videos over the next 10 days on my YouTube channel as I kind of scramble to catch up. And they're not all going to be buy my book, buy my book. Pretty much all of them are just my regular videos, but sort of showing how some of the principles I'm applying from them have been done in Kingdom of Dragons. Kind of like how we were talking, today about just sort of the writing lessons I've learned from it and everything. Because I think that that's something I've always really enjoyed other authors talking about is the different things that each book has taught them, the storytelling lessons they've learned from
Mhm.
writing their various novels. So I would like to talk a little bit more about that on the channel and just share some of the insights there because I think that regardless of whether someone wants to read the book or not, like there's a lot of benefit that comes to them as a writer in that way. So yeah, that's probably been the biggest one, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose that's just been it. There's just been so many moving pieces to it, to be honest, and it's
It
very
looks
different
that way.
to yeah, it's very different to kind of like a regular book launch where you sort of just like get it set, you send it out to lots of reviewers, and then you kind of wait, 2 or 3 months for them to start feeding stuff back in, and then you publish it. And um, whereas the Kickstarter, it's like it's a very public thing, right? Like
Yeah.
people can see it immediately. They can see like how well it's doing. They can see if it's close to funding or whatnot. So I think that's just brought in a different level of stress, but it's been a positive stress. Like as you were saying earlier on, if you don't feel uncomfortable, then you're not growing. And I
Mhm.
think that it's helped me grow a lot in the process of kind of getting this book up on Kickstarter and just seeing how it's going. And I can now say that I've sort of tried 3 totally different publishing approaches with my self-published books. I had my video game that was published by an actual company last year, and then with Kickstarter. So it's just good to be able to experiment with these different methods and see which ones are useful and which ones you might not want to repeat again and that sort of thing. So yeah,
That's wonderful. That's great. The marketing seems to it's a beast of its own. It's one of
yes,
those things that is always going to be necessary, but it's not always the easiest thing. It takes a lot of legwork, and you're doing
Yeah.
that. Soul Free Wolf says, thanks for the videos, Jed. They've been
Oh,
helping with my first attempt.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for the kind words there. That's great.
Yeah. That's got to feel so cool, man. Just
Yeah.
inspiring people, and not only that, kind of equipping them with the tools based on your own experience.
Absolutely. It's really awesome because like I think it's just really great to have this outlet where I can share the stuff I'm learning because I can't I live in Perth. There's not like a ton of authors around here or anything like that. So and there's only so many times that I can, be chatting with my friends about like, oh, I just figured out this dialogue technique, or I just figured out like this character arc or whatever. Before they're like, I have no interest in writing a book or whatever. Like, I don't really care about this kind of thing. So it's nice to be able to have an outlet where you can share that with people who, are on the same mission as you, the same mission to write great fantasy books and to, hopefully have readers super enjoy them as well. So yeah, it's been an awesome outlet, and it's been awesome to like just connect with different people like yourself, like Philip yesterday, and just everyone within the community is so friendly and so supportive. And it really feels like in the last few years in particular, the sort of fantasy YouTube, booktuber space, whatever you want to call it, has been, rising up quite a bit.
I just looked
There's
up
probably
a
more
picture.
authors in the town than I think. Yes.
So I just look. When you told me Perth time, I'm not gonna. Full disclosure, I had no clue what the hell that meant.
Yeah,
so of course I did my
nowhere.
research. It's always Australia. Like I talked to Richard Swan, wonderful guy.
Is he Australian? I had no
Yeah,
idea.
he is. Yeah.
Oh wow.
No. He's not Australia. He lives there near Sydney, I believe, Sydney, Australia.
Okay.
And he grew up, I believe, in the UK. But that's where he lives. But yeah, and New Zealand. Those are the two places. They're really hard to schedule. They always confuse
Yes.
me. It's actually, I got a hold of Jed last night. I said, just so we're on the same page, like double check my math here and make sure we're showing up at the same time. But we worked it out. But anyway, I just looked at the skyline. Wow, dude, that is one of the most beautiful skylines I've ever seen.
Thank you. Yeah,
Uh,
I feel really lucky where I live because I'm only about a 7 or 10 minute walk from this great park that runs along the river with this incredible view of the city behind
oh,
it. So I kind of see that skyline, almost every day when I go on my walk down there. So it's a very inspiring place to live.
it looks lucid. It looks in this picture I'm looking at is just it's lucid. I want to be there right now and just dip in the ocean, man.
Yeah, Perth is great. Like I absolutely like the beaches here. I feel like they're the best in the world. And I've been to beaches in a few different places around, some LA beaches, beaches over in Sydney, and like I think Perth beaches kind of make it difficult to travel anywhere else in the world to go to the beach is what I would say.
Sure.
And then if you go up the coast, you go up towards the north, because Perth is in the state of Western Australia, which is bigger than probably like I don't know, like half of Europe, maybe even like most of Europe put together. And so if you want to drive from Perth to the nearest capital city of our next state, that's like a 4 or 5 day drive pretty much just to
Oh
get out of the
wow.
state. So it's huge. But if you go up the north coast, there's like some incredible snorkeling locations. The Ningaloo Reef up there is amazing. There's a place called Coral Bay where I often go there, sometimes every year, where you can basically just like walk out onto the beach. You walk like 20 meters through the water. The sand sort of drops off, and then you just have like turtles and fish and all this coral just like literally right there off the coast, not off the coast, off the beach. So yeah, it's very inspiring, like natural location. I've like swum with whale sharks up in Exmouth,
So
which is also there as well.
that's kind of what I was going to ask. Like, does living in an environment like that where
Yeah.
it's just beautiful really affect the way that you write?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think like probably so much of my love for world building comes from just like the fact that I'm sort of lucky enough to live in this place that, many people kind of consider as a paradise. And I suppose that you have to, it's sometimes difficult to remind yourself of that when you've just lived here your whole life. And then you hear stories about people being like, maybe they live in the UK or they live in the US and they're like, oh, I've always wanted to travel to Australia. And it's like this
Mhm.
far off destination where it's kind of almost like on these mythical proportions. And
Yeah.
then meanwhile, here in Australia, we're all like, oh, it'd be so good to like go to Europe for the summer or something like that. So
Uh-huh.
there's a really funny effect, I feel like, where the further something is from where you live, the the
The
more
mythos of it. It's like,
mythologizing you do like around it, and the more you kind of see it as this incredible location. But yeah, just like kind of the stark beauty of the deserts while you're driving up north. Like there've been times when I've been driving up there with my family where, you know, the landscape around you is so flat. It's just this sort of like rust red landscape with these really low scrubby bushes, kind of like something straight out of Mad Max or whatever. And you could just be driving along a perfectly straight road, absolutely no one around, the sun setting, and you would not see another car for, you know, like 2 hours while you're driving up there. And you're like 500 kilometers from the nearest town or something, like 300 miles or whatever. And then you've got all the oceans, you've got the incredible marine life that's up there. You've got, you know, like I mentioned, there's the turtles. I've been able to swim with whale sharks, which is swimming with whale sharks was like one of the biggest times in my life where I just felt like I was in some fantasy story, because you read something like Dune, and, you know, the way that Herbert sort of describes the sandworms and everything as this, you know, incredibly alien creature, just the immensity of it and everything. Swimming with a whale shark is basically like the ocean version of that, where you're in the water. You can't really see anything. It's so deep and it's so clear, but you still can't see the bottom. And then there's just like this huge shadow that kind of like looms up from the distance. And then this massive Leviathan that I think is one of the biggest mammals in the world or whatever comes towards you. It's probably a good, you know, like 40, 50 feet long kind of thing. And comes towards you, and you're just like scrambling to get to the side, and then it goes right past. And they're very gentle creatures. Like they'll never attack you or anything like that. They just eat krill. So you feel totally safe when you're swimming next to them. And being able to like sort of swim alongside this whale shark we were doing it for about half an hour when we were north, and just getting to like duck dive next to it, and just seeing like this creature is so big that underneath its belly there's probably about 50 I forget the name of what they're called. They're like sort of almost like eel creatures that swim underneath it, and they kind of
catching a ride.
Yeah, they basically catch a ride. They sort of, I think they eat some parasites off it or something like that. So it's got like a bit of a symbiotic relationship. But each of those creatures would probably be, you know, half as tall as I am, but they look tiny just underneath this thing. So yeah, when you know, experience something like that, it's hard to not have it influence how you write about dragons, for instance, or how you write about different creatures, or even here in Perth, like if
those feelings.
Yeah, the feelings and that sort of. The whale shark did. Yeah, Corey's right. I actually made a whole video about that whale shark experience on the channel. So, so that's been incredible. And just even the fact that like where I am right now, you can walk about 35, 40 minutes to an island that's on the river right next to our city. And that island has 6 kangaroos on it.
Wow.
And like no one knows about it. Even people who live here in Perth, they like it's Harrison Island is the name if you want to check it out. But it's just a really cool place to live. I think it's like it is a place that feels like very unique, and there's a lot of different geography, and I think it's definitely inspired a lot of my writing in that way.
I think that so if I'm writing a scene where a dragon may be coming out of the woods, and I've never seen one, perhaps the feelings that you felt when you first saw that whale shark coming up on you, you can describe those emotions in relation to your experience. That's cool, man. Corey says, almost forgot. Are your dragons fully sentient, mental speaking, or more bestial?
Yeah, they're fully sentient. So each dragon develops so when you touch a dragon egg in the world of my story, the first person to touch an egg is the person who bonds with that dragon. So when it hatches, it'll have a sort of mental psychic connection to you, can't really talk to any other people. And that mental bond is a very core part of the story, because particularly for Roven and his dragon Gleam, you know, Roven sort of initially bonds with Gleam so that he can have a dragon to infiltrate the Dragon Riders Academy to destroy it from within. But he very quickly, you know, develops a rapport with Gleam, and they have an interesting relationship because Gleam is sort of his only real confidant. Like he's the only one who he can really tell the truth about what he is doing there. And Gleam also is very much bought into his mission because she has, you know, through this mental link, she's experienced everything that he's gone through, and she knows why this is something that needs to be done. But she also feels a tremendous amount of conflict because, you know, Roven sort of sees the other dragons as monsters, and Gleam is quite hurt. And she's like, do you see me as a monster? Like, are you afraid of me as well? And so they have like a very interesting relationship that kind of progresses over the course of the story, and gleams sort of difficulty of seeing herself as a dragon, amongst the others there versus being separate and sort of working against them is something that creates a lot of conflict and tension in the story. So that's sort of how the dragon rider connection works in the narrative. So good question, Corey.
Yeah, very good question. So will people be able to purchase Kingdom of Dragons after the Kickstarter's over?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone who backs on the Kickstarter will get it first. So it'll go out, exclusively on Kickstarter to the people who back there, whether that's an ebook or paperback or hardcover form. But then once we've sent out all the copies and people have got it and that sort of thing, then we will put it up on the regular places on Amazon, on other stores. Probably get an audiobook done for it at some point. If it's not done in the Kickstarter, we'll get an audiobook done eventually. The reason I would like to get the audiobook done through the Kickstarter is because then you can offer it at like a massively discounted rate, because you don't have to go through other platforms and that kind of thing. So of course it'll go up at some point on other stores and that sort of thing.
I think that's a huge up point to funding the Kickstarter, because look, you get excited about these books, and just to know that you're going to be the first people to experience it,
Yes.
and that is a huge selling point to me. I absolutely love that, and I think that's a really good marketing strategy as well. I think that's one, and that's a part of this, a huge part of it, like you said. So, what makes your Kickstarter a little different than others, would you say?
Good question. I think a lot of the Kickstarters we're seeing these days, which I absolutely love, are usually, deluxe editions of books that have been around for a while. They're usually very fancy editions of books that have developed a bit of a fan base, and, they're usually these big sort of faux leather things with all this gilding on them and that kind of thing. Kingdom of Dragons is like a totally, original new story. It hasn't been out or anything. This is basically, the first time it's gone out there, but it's still going to be a really nice edition that is much more closer to the price you'd pay for a regular book than some of those deluxe editions that have all this leather and that kind of thing, which are incredible as well. So, I'm not knocking those by any means. I love seeing those, and it's really cool to see the response that people have to those stories. And, I've got like Brandon Sanderson's sort of his fancy editions behind me on the shelf here, and I love having those on my shelf. But I suppose it's just it's different in the sense that, this is the first time the story's been out there. And we kind of have a chance to sort of shape the stuff that is included in it with the interior artwork, and hopefully we get some more bits and pieces of that on there. So I'm certainly not the first person to put like an original book up on Kickstarter. I know there's been a lot of other authors who have done it as well, but I just feel like it's a bit of a different way to go through it, and I really like the sense of direct connection that it gives you to your readers. I think that I would love to get to the point where there's not really any middleman between myself and my readers, where it's like you can write a book and they can have it, and there's not all these other parties between you and them that are going to take off their little shaves or make the experience worse for the readers, particularly when it comes to like if you a good example of that is if you buy like an audiobook on Audible, you can't then just like listen to it through like a different app, or you can't easily transfer it to people and that sort of thing. So I think it's just about like trying to have that direct connection with readers, and the fact that it's a totally new and original story that will hopefully be the start of a series that people come to quite enjoy over the coming years.
So that was my next question. Do you is this part of an ever-going series, and do you have a set number of installments?
Yeah, so I've mapped out a trilogy for this at the moment. So I have a very clear sense of how that might end. Like I mentioned before, this is set in a world where I have written other stories, and so I do see some ways for those to sort of intertwine at interesting points in the future. But at this stage, I'm just planning for it to be a trilogy. Perhaps as I get into that, it might expand, but I think a trilogy is pretty concretely mapped out in my mind at the moment. And then, of course, it is something where I'm hoping I can use it to set up a wider world where other stories can take place. And in particular, that story about the sort of desert tribe and the sand magic there, that is probably going to be the one that comes maybe after this series is complete, unless I decide to do something crazy like write another interactive fiction game, because I really enjoyed that last year. So that might be the thing I do after this series is done. But definitely for the next for the next couple of years, I see myself focusing pretty strongly on Rovan and Zora and this trilogy and their story.
And as a fan, that's something that's exciting. That's something that makes me want to invest my time and money in ambition in the start with Kingdom of Dragons, and the promise of there's more to come. I think that's highly valuable. So you maybe have answered a little bit of this, but I always like to ask, what is next for you?
Yeah, it's mostly just finishing the sort of proofreading on Kingdom of Dragons. So the story's all done, but there's just still some proofreading and some tighten ups, and it's always a kind of thing where you're constantly refining and polishing all the sentences until the day where your printer taps you on the shoulder and says, "All right, we got to send this book out to people." So sort of the production of Kingdom of Dragons is probably going to be the big focus for the next couple of months, and then I'll move into writing the second book. I might do there's a few little short stories I might do to kind of cleanse the palate before I jump back into that world. But yeah, next book is the plan. I've done a lot of outlining for it. I have a fairly clear sense of how it's going. It's probably the one where book 3 in the series, I have a very strong idea of how it ends, and it was one of the first things that kind of came to me when I was thinking about this story. But then, the middle is kind of fun in the sense that where your start and end points are to sort of pin the story down. But in the middle, there's just a lot of room for exploration and to really deepen the characters and to explore more of this world and everything. So yeah, that'll probably be the big focus after the production, is just outlining that book and then writing it. And hopefully, I don't want to put a firm date on it or anything, but hopefully the second book is, sort of done from my writing end by the end of next year. And then we either do, another Kickstarter, or we just launch it itself either next year or the year after. But of course, that depends on how it goes. It's still so early. So I have no idea whether it will evolve into something big. Because this first book is, I think, about 165,000 words. So it'll be around 700 pages. So it's quite a meaty tome.
I love. There's nothing better than a weighty. I guess if that's even a word. When you get it in the mail, it's just like, oh, that's a book that I can't wait to just read, man.
That's right.
I love a thick book. Yeah, love it.
So it's actually funny because when you put Kingdom of Dragons next to my 3 previous books that I've published, so Cross Broken Stars, Thunder Highs, Fires of the Dead, Kingdom of Dragons will be thicker than all of those combined.
Oh man!
So
that just shows how much time and effort and that you've put into this.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's how I feel about it as well. Because whenever I felt it seems like it's taken so long to get this book out compared to the others, I have to remind myself, yeah, no crap. It's literally 3 books worth of stuff that you've written in one book while trying to keep it cohesive and everything. So yeah, I'm actually yet to still hold a physical copy of it in my hand because we haven't obviously printed it for Kickstarter yet. I'll probably get some mock-ups as we go through the production process and everything, but I'm very excited to see what it actually feels like when I physically.
I'm sure that's an amazing feeling. Once you put all this work in and you just wait for it to kind of your proofs to come in and then that final product. Dude, I'm sure that's such a cool thing.
Yeah, I remember for my first book, Fires of the Dead, when I got a big crate of probably about 50 books for a book launch party here in Perth, and just seeing a whole opening up that box and just seeing your book in there, and not just one copy of your book, but a whole stack of them, it was wild, man.
It's cover yourself in them.
Yeah, you just take a lot of weird photos where you're sprawling out on them or whatever. You have your whole shelf is just the books. And so yeah, it'll be interesting, particularly for Kingdom of Dragons as well, because every paperback and hardcover copy of the book is going to be signed by me as part of the Kickstarter. So that's kind of another perk of doing
that's it. That's a huge perk.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to just having all of the sort of the tip-in sheets that we'll do the signing and sent here, and for me to actually go through that because of some shipping stuff, rather than sending the whole hardcover book over to me in Perth and then having to send it back, they'll just send a big sheet of the first pages, which I'll sign, and then they stitch into the books.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So yeah, because otherwise it's first of all, there probably just wouldn't be room in my house for that many books, and then second of all, just shipping that stuff to Perth and back would be really tough. So the tip-in sheets is kind of the approach for that. But that's going to be wild because I remember first time I had to sign a bunch of my books for a book launch sort of event, it was really weird to just be like, whoa, this is like this huge stack of stuff. Like, how do I? This
Yeah.
is kind of crazy, and yeah, it's really exciting.
Well, man, I'm just so excited for you, for what you've done, what you're doing, and what you will do in the future. Guys, just go check out the Kickstarter. It's, I mean, the format itself. There's a trailer. Once I figure out how to do a shared screen, I wish I would have figured that out before this, but I can't seem to find the answer. But
That's
go
all
check
good.
the Kickstarter out. He's got a wonderful trailer. Fund it, and you know what you're doing by doing that is supporting a very ambitious and somebody who loves what they're doing. They're helping the community. Jed here, he creates these videos to help people, and I think that that is such an important thing to support. So go check out the Kickstarter, go fund it if you can, and just I hope you're as excited as I am to get it in the mail. Yeah, I've had so much fun talking with you, Jed. It's really been kind of surreal. You're one of the people I watched before starting my own, and I'd really appreciate you let me borrow you for a little bit and hanging out on
It's a
my
pleasure.
channel, man.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. I really enjoyed this chat, and yeah, you asked some really fantastic questions, and I can see your passion for fantasy stories coming across. So it's been an absolute pleasure coming on here, and yeah, can't wait to have you read the book and see what you think about it.
Yeah, I'm very. We'll have to do another one of these kind of super spoiler, like
Definitely.
just totally in depth. Like, don't click unless you know what I mean. I've
Yes,
always
I
wanted
would
to
love
do one
that.
of
That'd be
those.
great. Yeah,
Awesome. Well, good, man. We'll keep in touch. And like I said, guys, go check out the Kickstarter. For you guys who are here live, I totally appreciate it. I'm sure Jed does too.
yeah. Thank you
And
so much for all your great questions. Really enjoyed these. So maybe I'll have to do more live streams in the future. This was a lot of fun, just seeing
they're
all the comments from you guys.
it's super cool. Yeah, I love it. It keeps it like fresh and keeps you on your toes. Um,
Absolutely.
uh, and for those who watch in the future as well, yeah, just enjoy it and go check out the Kickstarter. As far as for my channel, tomorrow I'm going to be talking to David Hopkins. He is the author of The Dryad's Crown. I believe that's his debut novel. He's a really cool guy. I'll be doing that at 9 o'clock Eastern. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing tomorrow. Jed, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. I hope it's full of wonderful writing or whatever you want to do today in just the happiest sense. And until next time, guys, I hope you have a wonderful night, day, morning, wherever you're at, and we'll see you next time.
See you, everybody.